This happened 2 years ago during Black Friday. I've always preferred to avoid crowds and do my shopping online, especially since many stores offer the same discounts without the chaos. That night I was looking for a new TV. My budget was limited, so I spent hours browsing websites in search of the best deal. Around 10 o'clock at night, I found an unfamiliar website that seemed trustworthy. The layout was simple, with the same types of images you'd see on any big retailer's site. The discount was almost unbelievable. A 55-inch TV for less than half the regular price. Without thinking much, I added it to the cart and completed the purchase. Everything seemed legit. I even received an email confirmation almost immediately. But that's when things started to get strange. Minutes later, I got another notification, this time on my phone, saying my credit card had been used for multiple purchases I didn't make. I panicked. I called the bank and they quickly blocked the card. Only then did I realize the website I had bought the TV from was probably a scam. Still shaken, I checked my email again. This time, I noticed something odd in the sender's address on the purchase confirmation. It was a random jumble of letters and numbers. I sighed, annoyed at myself for falling for a scam. I thought the worst was over, but I was wrong. About 1 hour later, while trying to relax watching TV, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message said, "Enjoying the new TV? Hope you like it. See you soon." My stomach dropped. My heart started racing. I blocked the number immediately, but couldn't stop looking at the windows in my living room. They were open, and outside there was nothing but darkness. I tried to convince myself it was just a cruel prank. Maybe the scammers sent messages like that to scare their victims. But then came the second message. "You should close the curtains. You never know who's watching." I jumped up and closed every curtain in the house. My mind was racing. Whoever this was knew where I lived. I went to the front door and checked if it was locked. I added extra locks and even pushed a piece of furniture against it. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. By midnight, I decided I needed to calm down. I grabbed my laptop to research more about the website I had bought from. Before I could type anything, I noticed the cursor started moving on its own. It opened a chat window in my browser. The message read, "Locking your doors won't help." I immediately shut the laptop and stood frozen in the middle of the living room, trying to process what was happening. My heart was pounding in my chest. I decided I couldn't stay there. I grabbed my wallet, my phone, and ran to my car. As I was driving to the nearest police station, I noticed something even scarier. A car was following me. It kept a far enough distance to avoid suspicion, but I knew it was there because of me. I made several random turns, but it stayed behind. Finally, I reached the police station and explained everything to the officers. They were skeptical at first, but after seeing the messages on my phone, they promised to investigate. The car that had been following me disappeared as soon as I entered the station. To this day, I never found out who was behind it. The website was taken down a few days later, and no one ever contacted me again. But ever since that night, I have one personal rule. I never shop online from unknown websites, no matter how good the deal looks. It was my first time participating in Black Friday. Since I was a kid, I'd always heard stories about crazed crowds, people fighting over TVs, and endless lines that seemed to go nowhere. Even so, I decided to take a chance. I wanted to understand the hype and hopefully score a good deal. I left home around 11 o'clock, confident I could find something before midnight. The drive to the store was uneventful, but the atmosphere already felt strange. The streets were quieter than usual for a Friday night. Maybe everyone was inside the stores or already home with their purchases. When I arrived at the parking lot of a 24-hour electronics store, I noticed something unusual. The lot was packed, but the silence was almost deafening. There were no honking horns, no loud voices, not even the sound of hurried footsteps, just the occasional noise of cars passing on the main road in the distance. After circling the lot a few times, I found a spot near the far corner. It was in a dimly lit area where the streetlights had burned out. A mistake, perhaps, but it was the only space available. As I parked, I noticed how much darker and eerier that part of the lot felt compared to the rest. Something in the air made me uneasy, but I brushed it off as nerves and exhaustion from the late hour. Inside the store, the atmosphere shifted completely. The chaos was a sharp contrast to the stillness outside. Shopping carts collided. People argued over products they barely understood, and the employees looked like they were about to collapse. I weaved through the crowded aisles, trying to ignore the commotion, and finally found what I was looking for. A tablet at a fantastic discount. I grabbed the box quickly, half expecting someone to snatch it from me, and made my way to the checkout. Surprisingly, the process was quicker than I'd expected. Within 15 minutes, I was walking out of the store with my bag in hand. Outside, the scene was different from when I'd arrived. The parking lot was much emptier now. A few cars remained, but most people seemed to have already left. The silence was even heavier, almost oppressive. I walked briskly toward my car, feeling the weight of the tablet in my bag and trying to ignore the chill creeping up my spine. As I approached, something caught my eye. A car was parked 2 spaces away from mine. It definitely wasn't there when I arrived. Inside the vehicle, someone was sitting in the driver's seat. The darkness made it impossible to see their face, but I could feel their gaze fixed on me. I pretended not to notice and kept walking. When I reached my car, I unlocked the door quickly and tossed the bag onto the passenger seat. As I did, I heard the distinct sound of a car door opening. My heart raced. I turned around and saw that the person in the other car had gotten out. They were now standing next to their vehicle, staring directly at me. "Do you need help?" I asked, trying to sound calm. There was no response. The figure just stood there motionless. It was a tall man, wearing a long coat and a cap that obscured much of his face. Swallowing hard, I climbed into my car and immediately locked the doors. I started the engine and began backing out of the spot, but something made me glance toward the lot's exit. Another man was standing in the middle of the driveway, blocking my path. He was wearing a similar coat and had the same unnervingly stiff posture. My instinct screamed at me not to stop. I hit the gas and swerved around the man, not caring if he'd get upset. As I sped out of the lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Both men were still there watching me. One of them raised his hand as if to wave, but the gesture felt more like a warning than a farewell. I thought I was safe until I noticed something even more chilling. A car was following me. It was the same vehicle that had been parked near mine. It kept a reasonable distance, but its headlights were locked onto my car. I tried to stay calm. I drove aimlessly, making random turns and heading down deserted streets, but the car stayed behind me. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might burst. My mind raced with questions. Who were these people? What did they want? Finally, I saw a sign for a police station. I turned sharply into the lot and parked near the entrance. Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw the car that had been following me stop on the street. Its headlights turned off, and it sat there for a few seconds before pulling away and disappearing around the corner. I rushed into the station and explained everything to the officers. They listened carefully, and though they seemed skeptical at first, they told me it wasn't uncommon for criminals to use Black Friday as an opportunity to rob or stalk distracted shoppers. What disturbed me most, however, was the last thing one of them said. "You're lucky. If you had stopped or hesitated, you probably wouldn't be here right now." Since that night, I've avoided going out alone, especially to isolated places or late at night. Even now, I sometimes feel like I'm being watched when I park in dark areas. Maybe it's just paranoia, but a part of me believes those men are still out there, waiting for their next opportunity. That Black Friday, I was determined to find the perfect gift for my younger sister. She's always been fascinated by antiques and unique objects, so instead of heading to big retail stores, I decided to visit a local market that advertised special deals. It was one of those temporary fairs set up in abandoned warehouses, filled with vendors selling everything from old furniture to handmade jewelry. I arrived around 10 o'clock in the morning. The place was busy, but it didn't have the chaotic crowds I'd expected at big stores. It was a relief to browse through the stalls without being shoved or rushed. I wandered between the stands, ignoring things that didn't match my sister's taste, until I noticed a small booth tucked into the far corner of the warehouse. The booth stood out from the rest. It didn't have bright signs or loud music to attract customers, just a simple table with a handful of items scattered almost carelessly. There was something mysterious about its simplicity that drew me in. I walked over and began examining the objects. At the center of the table, a small wooden box caught my eye. It was beautifully crafted, with floral patterns carved into its surface that seemed to tell a story of their own. When I picked it up, I was surprised by its weight. It was heavier than it looked. A middle-aged man with an unusual smile approached me. "Do you like it?" he asked, his voice unnervingly calm compared to the noise around us. I nodded, still admiring the intricate details. "What is it exactly?" "It's a unique gift, handcrafted, very old. Your sister will love it." I was startled that he knew it was for my sister. Perhaps he'd guessed it from the way I was looking at the item. I asked the price, expecting it to be expensive, but he offered such a ridiculously low discount that I couldn't say no. The deal seemed too good to be true, but I didn't think twice. I paid in cash, thanked him, and returned home, feeling like I had scored the perfect gift. That evening, I wrapped the box in gift paper and stored it in my room until Christmas. I couldn't wait to see my sister's face when she opened it. But in the days that followed, strange things began to happen. It started with the sound, a faint whisper that seemed to come from inside the box. At first, I thought I was imagining things, maybe the wind slipping through a crack in the window. But even when everything was completely silent, the whispers persisted. Then the lights began flickering. It happened more often when I was near the gift. Sometimes the bulb in my room would go out entirely for a few seconds before coming back on. I considered opening the box to check if something inside was causing these disturbances, but every time I tried, I felt a strange aversion to it. It was as if my hands refused to touch it. On the third night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. My first instinct was to check the front door, but it was locked. The windows were shut tight as well. When I returned to my bedroom, my heart froze. The gift was on the floor, unwrapped. The wooden box was open. With trembling hands, I approached it. Inside the box, there was a piece of aged fabric, stained with what looked like dried blood. Resting on the fabric was a small, golden-framed mirror. As I looked into the mirror, I saw my reflection, but something was wrong. My eyes in the reflection didn't look like mine. They were empty, staring back at me, as though something else was watching me through the glass. From that night on, things only got worse. I began hearing whispers not just in my room, but all over the house. Sometimes they said my name, other times it was faint, eerie laughter. The mirrors in my house started fogging up on their own, and I saw shadows moving within them, even when no one else was around. Desperate, I decided to return the box. I went back to the warehouse where I'd bought it, but it was completely empty. There was no sign of the market. It was as if it had never existed. With no other options, I resolved to get rid of the box. Late at night, I drove to a nearby river. I threw the box into the water, watching as it sank beneath the surface. For a moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But the relief didn't last long. The next morning, when I woke up, the box was back in my room. It was sitting on my dresser, exactly as before. But something had changed. The mirror inside was cleaner, shinier, and my reflection appeared closer, as if it were trying to step out of the glass. Since then, my life has become a nightmare. I don't know how to get rid of the box. All I know is that every time I look into the mirror, I feel like I'm losing a piece of myself. And sometimes, when I'm not looking, I'm certain my reflection is still there, watching me.